A huge thank you to everyone who's continued to support my work on Talk Beliefs. I now have a Patreon campaign where all contributions go towards the cost of travel, audio and video equipment, and fees to religious events that I fully intend to continue to infiltrate. Thank you. Not too long ago, I went to a church event in London where the public was invited to come in and ask difficult questions about Christianity. There were different themes, and it went over 5 different weeks. I made a recording of pretty much everything that went on, and also after the actual event, I would approach the various Christian experts and have a one-on-one with them. Now, one of the most incendiary topics in Christianity is the problem of suffering, the problem of evil, and violence in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, the older part of the Bible, where God seems to be a bloody warmonger. So, putting my best polite voice on, I approached one of the experts and asked him how would he explain the violence in the Bible. And this is what happened.
I mean, they were good. They were good questions, though, I thought.
Yeah, they were actually very good questions.
Yeah, like the one where why would God, allow those things to go on in the Old Testament?
Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with that passage. I'd have to go away and think more carefully about a particular question. I wasn't able to come up with an answer immediately on that one.
I mean, I have asked that question to people myself, in churches and so forth, and they always say, well, it was okay in the Old Testament and in the Old Covenant, and the New Testament everything changed. But God is still allowing, people, tribes, armies, whatever, to go in and slay people, including children. Take the women and basically, make them sex slaves against their will.
Yeah.
So why would God allow that in any circumstance?
I'm not sure it's really being taken as a sex slave. I think it's just making a person their wife.
Yeah, but it's against their will,
And I'm not sure whether that's necessarily implied. I mean, they've been captured, and it's just... The rules are more about giving the person a period of time to leave behind their old religion. It says you may take them as your wife.
Yeah.
It doesn't say you have to take them as your wife.
But it's still God is saying that's okay. I can't imagine Jesus saying that.
What would happen? What would happen to that woman? Because you've got a society which is very much based on the family. What happens? You get a Ruth situation where you're cast out of your country. Where are you going to go?
Yeah.
So there's another side to it that's of provision for. First of all, the fact that the woman's alive and she's not been killed, which will very often have happened. Secondly, she's not being immediately raped. And thirdly, she's been allowed to settle into a context and treated respectfully. So those are three very, very different things from the rest of the ancient world around. But I don't feel I have full answer to it. So.
Yeah, well, it's just something I struggle with myself, right? It's something I can relate to it. So because relate to it because I've thought about that, because I did read the Bible pretty much beginning to end, and then I thought, hang on, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense.
Are you a believer?
Well, I was brought up that way, but
what
it's
do you now?
more agnostic, I guess now.
Yeah.
I just found that those sort of things. And there's a lot of it, slaying the Amalekites and the Canaanites and all that.
Yeah.
And yet Jesus comes along, and he's supposed to be one and the same with God, and yet he's very meek and mild, and he overturns some tables, but that's about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he says some quite straight things to people. They call the church, the religious leaders of the day, whitewashed tombs and a brood of vipers.
Yeah.
I think we see God's abhorrence of lots of things that the people in the Canaanites are doing. You certainly get put in prison for these days.
Yeah.
And in some countries, you'd there'd be very long prison sentences, and you maybe even suffer capital punishment. So I think we've got to set that as the background. And the fact that all of us deserve that judgment from God. So I'm not sure we do fully have all the answers to the questions. I think rather than looking at the questions, we have to come up and look at the character of God, what God is like, and whether He's just or not.
Well, as a kid reading, I didn't read the whole Bible as a kid, but I heard, stories, and I always thought the God, the Father of the Old Testament, is quite scary, and is in some cases actually cruel. And I remember reading about, the Ten Commandments, and I'd say, Mom, why isn't there a commandment that says, don't commit war? Because people die, It's a horrible thing.
Yeah.
And yet he seems to be saying, yeah, go for it, go in there, get rid of them, kick them out.
Well, it says don't merge is what it says, isn't it?
Yeah, but he seems to be okay with war.
Yeah.
In fact, he commands it quite a bit.
That's right, yeah.
So...
Well, I think, again, the command about murder is... It's talking in a different context, is how I see it. It's talking about something happening on a personal level. The group of commandments that's in are within not stealing, killing, not stealing, not committing adultery, not wanting your neighbour's property. It's about the personal relationships with people. It's saying basically you can't go around sticking a knife in people. So that's one thing. The other thing is about God meting out His judgment on people and using agency to do that. So I think that's how I would deal with that question. We're talking about two different things.
Yeah. But he could have had, like with Sodom and Gomorrah, he could have just sent fire down and bam, it's gone.
Yes.
But he instructed a whole bunch of soldiers to do it. And even in the case of Samuel, he said, no, you didn't do it right. Go in there again and kill the animals as well.
Well, Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed by fire.
That was, yeah.
Yes.
But why didn't he just zap, destroy, Canaan and all these other places? Why did he send in?
Well, because there was also provision in the law for people to surrender and for them not to be destroyed.
Yeah.
That's a really important point. So basically, these cities were actively they were not responding to the chance that they had.
Yeah.
They were there's a very famous case of Shechem, where the people dressed up in worn-out clothes and grew beards, and they went out to the Israelites and said, "We've come from a long journey. We hear you're going to come and destroy us. Please have mercy." And they said, "Fine." And it turned out they were just from down the road, but they still gave them mercy. So that's really important in the warfare of the Old Testament, of providing mercy. So, and if you look at the actual number of destructions that there were, it's actually quite limited.
There's still destruction as well.
That's right, because that was the way. That was part of God's judgment.
Yeah.
He's saying these things are horrendous, just as they are to us today, and he's saying this is how I'm going to deal with it right now. They're saying this is a very, very serious thing. In humanity, you have to not realise what I'm saying, being patient with you. And I think we must also recognise that God is as harsh or harsher on His own people. Right before the conquest, there's a massive slaughtering in the camp of Israel. There's about a third of the Israelites and all the wilderness. So He's harsh in that sense with everybody. And that harshness against, that holiness against evil hasn't shifted, except that it's shifted onto Christ.
But Christ said, turn the other cheek.
Yes, this is in a personal interaction, yes. But wrong has to be paid for. If you go and hold up do an armed robbery in a bank, you can't just expect the judge to say, well, it's okay, you made a mistake, we're sorry, or you go and rape someone and say, well, yeah, we know you're sorry, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's no justice. So who is going to pay? You either have to pay for it yourself, or someone else has to pay for it instead. God would not be just if he just let people get away and carry on doing these things.
Yeah.
And in particular, causing people to worship other gods than him. I mean, that's really serious, because that has eternal consequences in his book, or in reality, in his reality.
Well, I mean, if they're brought up in a certain religion, that's all they know, really, you know. So
That's right, but if they're given a chance to repent,
yeah.
as we have evidence from the Old Testament law, and we have actual case examples when they did.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important.